I hope that you are well, and I also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today we'll be doing our grade 5 English lesson on sensory details. And before we start, we're going to log on to aplusstudents.ca. Once you've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username, so we're going to log on with our username as well as our password. And once you've logged on with our username and password, we're going to scroll down up until we get to the chapter of sensory details, English language arts, grade 5. All right, so sensory details, right? We said our chapter is sensory details. Our subject is English language arts, grade 5. All right, so we are doing sensory details, right? So we see that our chapter is sensory details, English language arts, grade 5. All right, so we're going to identify sensory details as per our lesson, right? So, writers they use sensory details to make stories and scenes easier for the reader to imagine, right? And if you look at sensory details, so the word sensory, right? In the word sensory, we can think of words like using our senses, right? And remember, we have 5 different senses. We have sight, we have sound that we can hear, we have smell, something that we can smell, taste, and touch, right? That is our 5 sensory details or senses, right? So a sensory detail, it makes the reader imagine. So it makes the reader imagine a particular sight, sound, smell, taste, or touch. All right. And once again, we say you writers they use sensory details to make stories and scenes easier for the reader to imagine. And that is why they use words or sensory details such as sight, sound, smell, taste, or touch, right? All right. So remember we said with sensory details, right? It is to do with our senses. And if we go to the first sense, right, which is sight, being able to see, it says John's face glowed from the light of the fire. So that is sight. And if we hear the sentence, John's face glowed from the light of the fire, and then we can say his face glowed, right? And that gives us a more deeper meaning the sight of something that you can see. Then we have sound, right? Sound. And it says, in the morning, Samantha awoke to the chirping of birds outside her window. Or we can say Samantha is awoken by her alarm in the morning, or the sound of her parents talking in the next room, right? But that is sound, some things that you can hear, right? So here it says, in the morning, Samantha awoke to the chirping of birds outside her window. So chirping of birds, we can say that that is our sound. Then we have smell. We have smell. And I caught a whiff of freshly baked bread as I passed by the bakery. So I caught a whiff of freshly baked bread as I passed by the bakery. And then we have taste, right? Then we have taste. And it says, the sharply sour apple made Mary's mouth pucker. It's things that you can taste. All right. So we say taste, all right? And the sharply sour apple made by Mary's mouth pucker. And then lastly, we have touch, right? This is the fifth sense. This is touch. It's touching things with our hands, right? That is touching. And Ted was uncomfortable in his scratchy wool sweater. All right, so we said that Ted was uncomfortable in his scratchy wool sweater. All right, so once again, Ted was uncomfortable in his scratchy wool sweater. All right. So once again, when it comes to our sensory details, right? We said sensory details, it's where the writer uses all these details to make stories and scenes easier for the reader to understand, right? Because it's almost like giving us the setting now, where, when, what it is, right? What do you see? How do you see it? What is the sound, right? Is it too low? Is it too high? Right? So which means that the writers, they use these sensory details to make stories and scenes easier for the reader to explain. All right. And we say when it comes to our sensory details, right? We listen to our five senses. When it comes to sensory details, it's to do with our senses. And it makes the reader to imagine a particular sight, sound, smell, taste, or even a touch. Right? And if we once again go over our five senses, so we have our five senses, and our five senses is sight, it is sound, smell, taste, and touch, right? That is our five senses. And we see that sensory details, it makes the reader imagine a particular sight, sound, smell, taste, or even touch, right? All right, so we are doing a tutorial lesson on aplusstudents.ca. So let us go to aplusstudents.ca. All right, we said our chapter is sensory details, and our lesson is to identify sensory detail. All right, so we're going to identify our sensory details. And we did say our sensory details is to do with our five senses, right? And our five senses, which is to see, which is sight, which is to hear, which is sound, to smell, taste, and to touch, right? So, in order for us to make writing interesting, not just the writers, and then we are going to have to use our sensory details, right? And sensory details, like we said, it is to do with our senses, where we're at, right? That is sensory details. And when they list, for example, the the different kind of sensory details, right? All right. So if we look at the different type of sensory details, remember we said writers use these sensory details to make stories and scenes more easier to read, because then you'll be able to imagine what they're actually trying to say and what the important things are, right? It says, select a sentence with a sensory detail that describe a taste. So we are going to read the text. So it says, for example, Brooke's friend Annie was teaching her how to ski. Brooke was surprised at how much physical effort skiing requires before her lesson. Brooke had assumed that skiing was just sliding downhill, but it wasn't that easy. She realized, stopping to rest, she licked some of the salty sweat dripping from her forehead down to her upper lip. Apparently, she did not need a big parka. And if we were to identify or select the sentence with a sensory details that describes a taste, right? Something that describes taste within that paragraph, we can say she licked some of her salty sweet dripping. So salty sweet, right? That is basically describes the details. So if we look at the specific paragraphs, right, they will, for example, tell us if it is to do with smell, taste, touch, or yo sound, right? In this case, it is to describe a taste, right? So which means that in every paragraph, there is something that you need to describe when it comes to the senses. All right, we're looking at the next sentence, right? Brooke's friend Annie was teaching her how to ski. Brooke was surprised at how much physical effort skiing requires before her lesson. Brooke had assumed that skiing was just sliding downhill, but it wasn't. It wasn't that easy. She realized, stopping to rest. She licked some of the salty sweat dripping from her forehead down to the upper lip. Apparently, she didn't need a big parka. All right. So if we look at the next one, right, it says we need to also select and describe the taste, right? Is this two the same? Ah, this two is actually the same. Sorry. Okay, let's go to the next one. It was getting late as Henry walked down the street. He felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Was somebody following him, or was that his imagination again? Just then, his brother Bruce ran up. Bruce explained that everyone was waiting for Henry to get home for dinner. Henry breathed a sigh of relief. He might not admit it to Bruce, but he was glad Bruce was there. All right, so now it says that we need to select the sentence in the sensory details that describe how something feels to touch, right? And if we were to talk about touch or something, how it really feels, we can mention cold shiver, right? A cold shiver. Because it says he felt a cold shiver run down his spine, right? Yeah, it says the next one says we need to select the sentence with the sensory detail that describes a sound. So a sound, something that we can hear, right? So it says Erica arrived late to ice hockey practice. Already, the swishing, scraping noise of skates on ice filled the ring. Erica rushed to lace up her skates and join her teammates. She wanted to show Coach Barron how she had practiced shooting goals. She got onto the ice just as Coach was giving directions for the day. Why, oh, why did hockey practice have to start at 5 o'clock in the morning? So, if we look at the sentence, right, or words that describe a sound, then we can say already the swishing, this is now a sound. It is the swishing, scraping noise of skates on ice. So it's the swishing, scraping noise because it is on ice, right? Why do you think she asked the question, why did hockey practice have to start 5 o'clock in the morning? All right. So if we describe the sound, right? In this case, we are describing the sound of the skates on ice, right? In the ice rink, then we can say it is swishing sound and scraping noises. That is the sounds that we would hear if we're going to the ice skate, ice skating. All right. So now we're going to our twist, right? We're going to our test where we're going to identify sensory details. So we need to identify the sensory details within these sentences. It says select the sentence with a sensory details that describe how something feels to the touch. Feels to the touch. It says my brother Zane works at the petting zoo. That's where little kids can go if they want to pet some animals. The zoo operator put only the gentlest animals in that section of the zoo. I asked Zane which of the animals is his favorite. He said that he likes the baby llama because he likes to stroke her soft silky fur. I think I like the baby duckling the best. So now we need to describe how something feels to the touch. Is it line 1? All right, so if we identify the sensory details, right, when it comes to the touching, then it says that he would like to stroke the llama's soft, silky fur. So, soft, silky fur. And that gives us an indication that it is something that you feel to the touch, right? Something that you feel to the touch. All right, and that is and that is correct. Now we also need to describe something that we can feel to the touch. It was getting late as Henry walked down the street. He felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Was somebody following him, or was that his imagination again? Just then, his brother Bruce ran up. Bruce explained that everyone was waiting for Henry to get home for dinner. Henry breathed a sigh of relief. He might not admit it to Bruce, but he was glad Bruce was there. All right, and if we identify the sensory details, right, that tells us how it feels to feel to the touch. Is it cold shivers or was waiting? All right, and if we describe how something feels to the touch, then we can say it is a cold shiver, right? That is feels to the touch. Yes, well done. A cold shiver is correct. So cold shiver is correct because that is feel to the touch. Doesn't have to be a physical feel, but that is how she feels. We need to describe the sound. So we're describing the sound. It says Rosa pulled on her cap and climbed onto the tractor, ready to plow her vegetable garden. She turned the switch and heard the engine grinding and whining, but it wouldn't start. Rosa went into the barn to get her horses to pull the plow. She'd rather work with the horses anyway. And maybe now she would advertise that her beets and broccoli were all natural. So we need to select the sensory detail that describes a sound. All right. Is it engine grinding and whining or to work with horses? All right. So if we look at the sensory details where we need to describe sound, all right, so we need to describe details of a sound, right? Sound. So we're going to read the one story and then we're going, actually, we read this already. So which means that we need to say if it's engine grinding and whining or work with horses as a sound. All right, so we said we need to either choose engine grinding and whining or work with the horses. And if we choose the correct one, we would say that this engine was whining and grinding, and that is the sound that we could hear. All right, we need to describe a smell. It says after the basketball game, Troy headed to the locker room. He wrinkled his nose at the sweaty stench that greeted him. Right now, he wanted to shower, change his clothes, and go home. But as usual, coach wanted to have a team talk about the game. Troy sighed and pulled off his sweatshirt. At least they had won tonight. So it would be a happy teamwork or team talk. All right. So it says select the sentence with the sensory details that describe smell. After the basketball game, Troy headed to the locker room. He wrinkled his eyes out at the sweaty stench that greeted him. Right now, he wanted to show, change his clothes, and go home. But as usual, coach wanted to have a meeting to talk about the game. All right. So we need to talk about the smell that we've been smelling, right? So we need to describe a smell. Is it a sweaty stench that you can smell? Or is it just talk about the game? Something that you can smell. A sweaty stench. All right. So if we describe a smell, then we can just say it was a sweaty stench, right? Smelling like underarms, but sweaty stench. All right. And that is correct. So it's a sweaty stench, right? It smell. All right. So we need to describe the sound. It's a sentence with the sensory details that describes a sound, right? We now need to find out what the sound is, right? It says last Saturday, Officer Roy went to work at the police station. He was trying to solve a big case. A valuable ruby ring had been stolen and nobody knew where it was. Officer Roy started at his computer screen. He heard a single knock at the door. Opening the door, he saw no one, but on the floor was a neatly folded note with Officer Roy's name on it. It was a clue. Coming into the office this Saturday was worth it. All right. So if we can hear a sound, then we can say he heard a single knock at the door or a single sharp knock at the door, right? Because that is to do with the sound. It's something that you heard. Remember, we are listening, we're talking about sound. So, sound is things that you can hear, right? Whether it is from the phone or conversation or something that someone is doing, it's something that you heard or you hear. All right. So now we need to describe the taste, right? Something that tastes. It's food, anything. It says Brooklyn's friend Annie was teaching her how to ski. Brooke was surprised at how many physical efforts skiing requires. So before a lesson, Brooke had assumed that skiing was just sliding down, but it wasn't easy. She realized stopping to rest, she licked some of the salty sweat dripping from her forehead down to her upper lip. Apparently, she didn't need a big parka. All right. So if we describe a taste, something that you've tasted, is it salty, sweet, or licked some? All right. We're talking about taste. Taste. Is taste something salty, salty, sweet, or licked some? It says licked some of the salty sweet dripping from her forehead down. Right? All right. Let's go with salty sweet for now. Right? And salty sweet that she was licking is correct. We need to describe a taste. A taste. It says Steve won 200-meter race with a burst of speeding at the finish. He was the new state champion as Steve caught his breath. His coach and teammates all rushed over to congratulate him. Everyone was cheering. Steve had never been happier or hungrier. To celebrate, Steve's parents took him to his favorite restaurant. His meal came with the best tangy barbecue sauce that he had ever had. It was a dinner fit for a champion. All right. So if we describe something that we can taste, we can say it is a tangy barbecue sauce, right? All right. So this is now the end of our lesson on sensory details. We said sensory details to do with our senses, right? And a writer usually he or she works very well when they are more intact with the senses, right? And they will be able to write something well and something perfect based on using or describing the five senses. All right, so this is the end of our lesson. Thank you very much for joining the class. Goodbye.